Hey guys, Matt Rod here with Control Free, and I'm here to bring you a new video on 10 beginner tips that are a must if you're just starting out mixing. Be sure to stay tuned for the bonus tip at the end. You don't want to miss it. Alright, so we're starting out with the first tip. It is gain staging. Gain staging is when you check the levels of every track and every component in part of the mix to see if one is being more overbearing than another. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to use gain staging and how it can be helpful in the mix. Here's a simple drum loop. Alright, so right there you can hear that snare, that pop. Yeah, whatever that was, that noise was. That pop, it could be a little bit too loud in the mix and it could be overbearing. Or maybe that's what you want and you want it to come in higher. So what you do is you go through, in gain staging, you go through every single track and see if the volume is where you want it to be. So if we want to make that pop more, you can take away. You can also bring it up, or if it's too in the front, you can bring it down. And there's other ways to make that sit better in the mix, and we're going to go over some of those tips later on in this video. Tip number 2 is use high quality monitoring. If you can get yourself a decent $100 pair of headphones, or closed back studio headphones like the ones I have over here, these are Sennheisers, they're cheap, they get the job done. Or if you can get yourself if you can splurge a little bit higher, I think KRK Rocket monitor speakers, which I have in the back over here, if you can see right back there, you guys right there, those yellow ones, they're pretty cost effective, cost friendly. If you have around $300, I think, to get both, that's a good option, but I'm pretty sure there's more options to get some decent high quality speakers. Alright, tip number 3 is create frequency balance. Creating frequency balance is taking the parts of the song that belong in a certain area and making sure the frequency is not overbearing other frequencies, and they all sit together in a nice, kind of like orchestra. I always like to think of a mix as like an orchestra. You have certain instruments in the front and certain instruments in the back, and all in between. Alright guys, so we're going to go into balancing the frequencies in a mix. I'm just going to go very lightly on the surface of this because EQing is its own beast, and I'll definitely do a video on that later. But here's a simple loop that we're going to be working with. Okay, so there you go. We got the melody and we got the drums. So in Ableton or in whatever DAW you use, I highly recommend separating your melody and your drums, unless you want to mix it that way. Teach their own, but I separate my melody and my drums for the specific reason, because in frequency balancing there is the drums, which are always on the lower end of the frequency spectrum, and then there's the melody, which is usually towards the mid to high frequency spectrum. So it's easier to separate them out and do your frequency leveling there. So basically here you can already see that I have a low pass filter on the drums. So the drums, what a low pass filter does is it allows the lower frequencies to come through and it cuts off the high frequencies, leaving room for the sample here. Here's without the low pass filter on. And now here's with the low pass filter on. So that's one way of controlling your frequencies. See there, now the sample stands up a lot higher. The hi-hats aren't hitting as much. That's the basic level of controlling your frequencies. So tip number 4 is an optional tip that you can use at your discretion. I think it does help most mixes, but it's panning your tracks left and right so that it creates a more of a soundscape, and it adds depth to the sound. Alright, so here we have an example of what mono and left and right panning can do to open up your sound. I like to use this little technique a lot, but here, this track right here is on mono, this track is the same sample on right, and this track is the same sample on left, set to play together from left and right ear at the same time. Alright, let's get right to it. This is in mono. in stereo. So that's the same sample coming twice, just with 2 tracks left and right ear, and the first track on mono, so you can hear the difference. You can utilize this as a simple trick to create changes in tempo or changes in sound. When your song sounds like kind of repetitive, I like to use this a lot, and you can use it in many other ways too.
All right, tip number 5 is to use compression wisely, and use your compression in different parts, once again, to make it sound like an orchestra. Have everything sit in the right spots, maybe glue some things together, maybe shape the sound a little bit, or control a certain instrument or vocal that you need to come sit better in your mix.
All right, so here's a quick example on how compression can help fix problems in the mix. So here I threw on a saturator, which is a certain type of compressor, and what this does is it brings out the low end and makes it wider and more present in the mix. So here's an example of what it sounds like without the saturator on. We're just listening to the kick and drum loop here with the low end. Now let's throw some drive and throw a soft clip around there and hear the difference. See there, I had to, take the dry wet signal, throw a soft clip around, but using those settings, I can create a much wider low end without combating other frequencies and sitting good in the mix, and still keeping that orchestral kind of layer, the lows in the back and the highs in the front.
All right, tip number 6 is to use delay and reverb to bring certain things out and to create a larger soundscape and add depth to your sound.
Alright, so I'm going to show you guys an example of what reverb and delay can do to add depth to your sound and widen it up. So I'm going to use the clip we were using before where we have the left and right sample come in after the mono sample. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some reverb on this left sample, reverb on the right sample. I'll show you what it sounds like with both reverb on, and then show you what happens when you mix delay and reverb. So here is the regular sample of the 2 left and right ear with no reverb on it. Now here's with reverb on it. So that's, you can already hear it's a louder sound right there. And I have my reverb set up and my delay set up right here to my send. So this is what I'm gonna be, this is what it's gonna sound like with delay, without delay, with delay. Already you can hear the body of the whole track come together. Sometimes it can be a little bit too much. I put it all the way up. It could be overbearing. It could work. It could, depending on what sound you're going with. You have to mix with your ear, and just do what sounds good. I'm always gonna advise that. Do what sounds good. You can take my tips here, but then you can use everything with a grain of salt. Alright, so that's what it sounds like with delay and reverb on both. Now, what if we put delay on the right ear and reverb on the left? Already you can feel, if you have headphones on while you're listening to this, you can feel the difference. You can just hear it in both headphones. It becomes more of a dynamic sound. It creates layers and almost opens it up to like a 3D soundscape, whereas if you're just listening to tracks that are mono on top of mono on top of mono, it's just one dimensional.
Okay, tip number 7 is something I should have mentioned earlier, but it is mix your tracks or mix your song in mono, or at least check what it sounds like in mono. What this does is allows you to hear all the frequencies, all the layers to the song kind of smushed together on top of each other, so that you can see which one is blatantly staying outside of the mix. Then once you put your tracks back off mono, you can then do a final mix and hear the difference when you do use the two, and what the difference is when you lower one part of the track by mixing something in mono and then listening to it in stereo.
Alright, so here we're going to show an example of how you can benefit from mixing your track in mono and then listening to it back in stereo. All right, so here we have the whole song, the same sample we've been using, everything with the mixes on it. All right, same mix we've had. You just heard that in stereo. Now we're going to listen to it back in mono and hear what parts are standing too high in the mix and what aren't. Alright, so already I can hear the samples coming in too heavy, so maybe I put too much delay on there. Bring that down, because that reverb and delay will make the sound louder and more present. So we'll take that down. Then we can check the EQ and see if there's anything we can do on the EQ side to bring some space there. Maybe I'll take some high frequencies out. Now I hear the snare too high. Let's turn that down. There we go. Now with those edits, let's hear it back in stereo. So that's the mix, and it sounds like the sample is sitting a little bit lower in the mix, and then you keep playing with it from there, using your ear and seeing what sounds best. And practice makes perfect. So if you do this over and over again, you'll be able to understand and just hear it quicker and faster what parts need to be lowered, what parts need to be brought more to the front of the mix.
All right, tip number 8 would be to always use reference tracks. So let's say you're trying to make a song like Kendrick or Future or a country artist that I don't know the name of. You would take one of the songs that has the same vibe and feel that you're going for in your song, and don't take the lyrics, don't copy and paste the song. What it is just using the sounds that you hear and the frequencies that hit best and the way that they sit in the mix in a professionally mixed song, and then you take that and you listen to it back after you're done with your mix and seeing how close it matches, and trying to identify the key points where the mix is missing on yours or it has too much, and just balancing it out till it sounds similar to the reference track. Tip number 9 is something that I learned in the last couple years, is to always take breaks. If you're continuously working on a mix and it sounds worse and worse every time you edit it, and the more effects you put on, the more muddy the sound is getting, that usually means for me one of two things: I've overthought the process too much, and my brain and my ears aren't working together, or you're just overthinking the whole thing. And so going to sleep and waking up the next morning and checking that mix and listening to it with fresh ears is usually the best option before you continue to mess up your song even more. And another thing you can do too is just work on a different song. Sometimes it's just that one song that's got you stuck and you're just sitting there like, man, everything I do to this is making it worse. Well, if that's the case, then just work on a different song. If that happens again with that song, then take a break for the whole day. You can only work your creative mind so much sometimes before it gets in its own way. But it's a muscle, so the more you train it, the easier it is to handle and combat these things. All right, so tip number 10 is to use subtractive frequencies. And I'll show you guys more right here.
Here we're going to use the same sample we've been using the entire video to show what subtractive EQing can do to create more room in the mix and allow things to sit better. All right, so let's play a sample. I have an EQ on the melody already that we've been using, and the EQ that we've been using for the drums. And let's start with the drums and see what we can do to make them sit better by subtracting certain frequencies in the mix. So there we just I took a couple points, and I heard the hi-hats were coming in a little too high for me. So I dropped down the frequency where I heard the hi-hats coming in with a bell curve. If you don't know too much about EQing, I will do a follow-up video after this on how to EQ correctly. But this is subtractive EQing. So we took out some frequencies on the high end from the drums. Now let's take out some frequencies on the low end from the melody. So that's subtractive EQing. There we kind of got in like a general balance between the drums, the low end and the high end. And then there's the mid range you can use with compression and a lot of the tips we used before. And I highly suggest doing these things on each individual track so that each track has its own specific sound and nothing's sitting too much similar in the mix and mudding each other up in the long run.
All right, so you made it to the end of the video and you get in your bonus tip in here. If you did enjoy this video, please feel free to like and subscribe down there. Comment the parts you like, comment the parts you hate. I don't care. Throw a comment down there, whatever you want to say. If it's some random stuff, who cares? Quick, this video is sponsored by Dubby. You can use code MattRod to get a discount. Just use code MattRod on Dubby. It is some of the best energy you can get in a natural way without the jitters. You gotta try it, guys. It's some good stuff. So the bonus tip for this 10-part video is always seek feedback. Send your stuff to your friends, maybe not your friends, maybe your friends aren't the people that are into music or they care about it. Find people online. There's Discord communities you can join where people will literally give you actual honest opinions. Yes, there's gonna be some haters out there, but ignore them. Take everything with a grain of salt. Even in the hate, there's a bit of truth there, something maybe you can work on. But don't take it to heart. But yeah, always seek feedback from your peers and from people that are in your industry doing the same type of music as you is best, but just general consumer ear works as well because that's who you're trying to market to. All right, guys, I hope you liked this video. Please like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more. Tell me down in the comments what was your favorite part and what video I should do next. Thanks, until next time.